Task Force, and this is our September 22nd meeting. Welcome. My name is Rosemary Bosky, and I am the chair of the task force. With Mario here for the Department of Public Health, I'm going to consider this a quorum for purposes of our meeting today. He is representing Dr. Ojo, and we need four for that purpose, so I will call the meeting to order at 5:35. And just a couple housekeeping items. We have the documents that we will be looking at for today's meeting at the table as you walk in, so that if you need copies of anything, please let me know. Let me introduce our administrative staff. We have Bernadette Perez from the Housing Division and Matt Chukowski from the Director's Office here helping us with the task force. To my right, we have Deputy Director Dan Lowry, and to his right we have the Fire Marshal, Dan DeCosio, and also we have Mario, is it Olima? From the Health Department representing Dr. Ojo. So the other thing that I would like to mention is that if any members of the guests wish to sign in, it's totally up to you. You may do so. It is not necessary to attend or to give testimony. After each item, we will have public comment, and then we will have general public comment at the end of the agenda item. We also do have a PowerPoint presentation for at least a portion of agenda item number 4. The hard copies of that, as I indicated, are on the table. At this point, then, I would ask everyone to turn their electronic devices to silent mode, and then we can go ahead and proceed. We had some discussion at our last meeting regarding post-fire investigation, and that is something that the departments are still discussing. We're not at a point yet of making recommendations, so that item, I suspect we won't be taking any action on today, but I do want to give the members the opportunity to add any additional comments or to update the status of this for our guests. So with that, I am moving then to agenda item number 3, post-fire investigation. Is there any discussion from the members on this? Dan, since I wasn't at the last meeting and you were so kind enough to chair that meeting, could you just maybe give some comments about that? Thank you.
Okay, at the last meeting there, concerning as far as what we do between interagency, we work with the fire department when we have like a notice of violation. We have a referral on the bottom of the notice of violation. If we see something that the fire department needs attention to, or housing needs attention to, we refer that. Also, we have emergency services where if there's more than a 2-alarm fire, and if it's a serious fire, they call our department and we do dispatch a DBI inspector out there. And there's also a referral interagency. They give us a list, a monthly list of the bad fires, so we could track them. And then also if a notice of violation is required, we can give a notice of violation to it. And we discussed just different possible scenarios that we're going to work interdepartment. And we also, they asked if anything was on the web. Nothing's on the web as far as that right now. But we do have a DBI tracking system for complaints where they can get a 311 referral or anonymous referral. And that's public information. So anything information we gather from the complaint tracking system, it's posted.
Thank you. Yeah, and before we proceed, I was remiss. Let me go ahead and also introduce some of the other staff that are here to support the task force. Deputy City Attorney Tom Lackwitz, thank you for coming. Senior Housing Inspector Jamie Seven-Matsu, Housing Inspector Robert Wallers, Lily Magis, our Communications Director, and let's see if I missed anybody. Lily, could you come to one of the microphones, and could I ask you to briefly talk about the fact that the task force has a page on DBI's website, so if people would like to look at more information or a recording or listen to a recording of these meetings, they can do so. Would you just talk very briefly about what's on the website, the DBI website?
Sure.
Thank you.
Lily Magis, with DBI Communications Director. I think we previously mentioned this before, but just want to reiterate. Everything that we're talking about here is found online. It should be under sfdbi.org. You should see it on the homepage all the way at the bottom that says Fire Safety Task Force. If you put it in the search bar, it should come up as well. There is a page on it which has the agenda items as well as any materials that are provided here will be up on there shortly after the meeting, which should be the following day. We've also made the audio recordings for this meeting, the meetings, available online as well. So if you have any questions, you can contact us there.
Thank you, Lily. And the other thing that we will probably do, Matt, is to go ahead and put the location of the website page on the agenda so that people can have that as a quick reference. So with that, I backtracked there, but I wanted to make sure that everybody had that information. So if you missed something, you can go to the website and take a look at that and even listen to the entire proceedings over again. So with that, going back to agenda item number 3, is there any additional member discussion of the post-fire investigation item that we are having ongoing discussions about? Dan, do you have anything did you want to add to that? I want to give you the opportunity.
Sure, I'll add to that. Just a little background on what the fire department does. Fire department investigates every fire, whether it's a little trash fire, vehicle fire, structure fire, etc. So we investigate all fires. Our reports, we have NFIRS, National Fire Incident Reporting System, and then we have our own fire inspection reports, which is an enhancement or in addition to the NFIRS report. And so just a typical NFIRS report can be filled out by an engine company officer, can be filled out by an incident commander. That's where the known cause and origin, and they don't need to call 4710 and arson. When arson is called in, it's for unknown, undetermined. There's a fire, fatality, if there's serious injury, and a host of other things that 4710 is called in. Once 4710 is called in, then we have our own fire investigation report on top of, and including the NFIRS report. 90% of all fires are just handled at the NFIRS level only, where the engine officer, truck officer, or incident commander fills that out. The 10%. 4710 is called in arson for the remaining fires. And just looking at the numbers, a quick look at the numbers. About 65% of the fires are structure fires, 10% are vehicle fires, 25% are outside fires. So it could be trash cans, porta potties, vegetation, grass, etc. In the NFIRS report, in our fire report, obviously we look at all fire protection systems. If the structures have, what kind of fire protection systems do they have? They have sprinkler systems, fire alarm systems, smoke alarms, etc. We make note of that. Also, we make note if there's evidence that they performed as they were intended to be performed. Also, we do pull a history on it. We look at if there's any violations on the building, specifically to those systems. And as far as sharing this information, you have to, either the public or even other agencies at this time, they can email us, or you go online, sf-fire.org, and you could request it in writing or email it to us, and we can share all this information, obviously after the report's been completed and ready for public consumption.
Thank you.
Oh, and then also what Dan said earlier, we do have a monthly report that goes to the Housing Inspection Division and also to the tax assessor's office, and those are for fires with estimated damage of $5,000 or more.
Thank you.
Okay.
And I believe I did say at our first meeting that one of our goals is to be able to take some of that information and add additional data that DBI has on these so that we can look to see what the patterns may be of these fires, such as number of units, floors of occupancies, type of construction, so that we get a better feel for what is happening with these particular fires. So that is That is an ongoing discussion between the departments, and this will be an item that we will continue forward to a point at which that we're ready to give some recommendations, specific recommendations. So with that, if there's no other membership discussion, I'd like to open agenda item number 3 up for public comment. Is there any public comment with respect to that? And what we would do so that we could get a good recording, we do have the microphone by Matt, that if anybody does want public comment, we'll pass that microphone to you so that we make sure that we amplify you within the recording. Is there any public comment with respect to item number 3? There being none, we will then move to agenda item number 4, which is fire, housing, and building code enforcement. So with respect to this item, I want to go through a brief discussion of the code enforcement process that the Department of Building Inspection and specifically the Housing Division addresses with respect to the fire safety requirements that are in the Housing Code. The San Francisco Housing Code is a maintenance code that addresses how existing residential buildings are to be occupied, and there are specific requirements for hotels of 6 guest rooms or more, or apartment buildings of 3 or more dwellings. So with that, if we could go to the next slide, Matt, on the PowerPoint presentation. So this basically illustrates the types of ways a fire safety issue can come to us and the type of inspections we perform. It can be complaint generated from the building occupant, the member of the public, or another city or governmental agency. It can be through a city attorney task force inspection. Tom Lackritz knows about those. His staff would request various city agencies to participate in those. From time to time, we do room-to-room inspections of residential hotels, and definitely fire safety issues can come up as a result of that. Also, with respect to any inspections that are asked for by HSA regarding their master lease program or systematic enforcement, which most people are familiar with as our routine inspection, where we go in at least once every 5 years, look at the common areas of apartment buildings, and if fire safety issues come up there, we definitely would include those in a notice of violation. We also have something new called Focus Code Enforcement, which has been a response to clusters of fires in different parts of the city, specifically the Mission and other areas where we are, in addition to doing routine inspections citywide, we focus and prioritize those on larger buildings within areas that may have certain types of hazardous patterns occurring. So if we can have the next slide. So for the housing code, we're looking at some things that are similar to what the fire department is looking at, but we're looking at different codes, different code abatement processes. So obviously we're looking at fire escapes, extinguishers, alarm systems, required egress, the sprinkler systems that are required for in the housing code. It's pretty much limited to garbage chutes, garbage rooms, storage areas, etc. And then there's the residential hotel sprinkler ordinance, smoke detectors, carbon monoxide alarms, combustible storage of buildings, 4 units or more are required to have fire sprinklers within apartment buildings, and then the remaining items that you see there. So that's not everything, but it's a good list of the types of things that we're looking at that could come up within a notice of violation issued to a property owner that involve fire safety items. Next slide. So in addition to going out and doing an inspection, we do have in the Department of Building Inspection a rather robust code enforcement outreach program, and we have a lot of those members here today. And what we do and what they do is work with the property owners and with the occupants of these buildings to make sure that people are aware that there may be an issue that they need to bring to the attention of the property owner. We always encourage them to do that first, because the property owner that needs the ability to become aware and be able to correct any violations, but it also has to do with the behavior of people within a building too, and that means making sure that they have smoke enclosure doors, that they're kept closed, that they're not taking their personal items and putting them in a second means of a required means of egress, that if they see some kind of problem, they bring it to the attention of the property owner, or if that isn't issuing some kind of result, then they can then work with any of these vendors. So a lot of them are here. We have the SF Apartment Association. Jan and Charlie are there. And they are a crucial part of the representation of the property owners, and then we have a lot as well that represent the tenants. So if I can have a show of hands of those that are here that represent the tenants that are part of our outreach program, thank you for coming. And so we also have workshops that they conduct within residential hotels, and would, I'm sure, be available to work with Janan if a property owner of an apartment building wanted to have something like that occur as well. How do they do that? So these are some of the things that we're looking at. Maybe these are some of the things that will come out of this particular task force. Next slide, please. So if the Department of Building Inspection issues a notice of violation through either a complaint or systematic enforcement, they do a site inspection. They will issue a notice of violation if they see that there's a violation, and sometimes these will require permits to correct. And we will also make a referral to outreach if we think that that will assist the situation. We always want to try and have these things dealt with quickly at the lower level before something grows into a major problem. If we write a notice of violation, our notice of violation indicates the time for the reinspection, the time frame to comply, what the code sections are, and what that are applicable within the housing code, and then what steps the property owner or their agent needs to take to cure those violations. If we, upon that first reinspection, have everything abated, then we close that case out. If additional code enforcement is required that goes through to an administrative hearing and it requires additional reinspections, then the property owner will be billed for assessment of our costs, and that's generally not if the violations have been corrected around the time of that initial first reinspection. So that is our process. It's only I want to say that most property owners are very good. They comply. They're very cooperative. It's meaningful to them to make sure that their buildings are safe, especially with respect to fire safety issues. So it is a only small percentage of cases that go on to the city attorney, although those can take a while to deal with, as Tom is smiling over there. But it's a small percentage. That being said, we do have that. And in those instances that are appropriate, we are rather robust in making those referrals. Probably make more referrals than any other city agency with respect to that. And it's just the setup of the DBI and the way the housing code is situated. Next slide. So this just gives you a sample of, I was talking about that focused code enforcement. We actually, in addition to doing routine inspections on apartment buildings citywide, we focused on what we perceived at that particular time on specific areas where we wanted to make sure that the property owners were aware that something was happening within certain corridors. Next slide. So now, just very briefly, we're looking at fire extinguishers, sprinkler systems, garbage rooms, that type of thing. And again, some of these are similar to some of the things that the fire department looks at as well. Next slide. The certification for the fire alarm supervision box. We call it a supervision box. It's called something a little different in the fire code. That is one thing that currently isn't in the housing code, but at some point in the future we may be recommending that we be able to call that as well. Next slide. Obviously, this is something that both DBI and the fire department are always struggling with, and that is things being obstructing fire escapes or second means of egress. It's something that we're constantly dealing with. And we have a list there of additional items that we typically see with respect to fire issues that we frequently call and work with the property owners and the occupants of the building to make sure that everybody is observing what the rules are. Next slide. This is a picture of this was a required exit door that was chained shut. that particular case was immediately referred to the city attorney because it was the second or third time that we had dealt with this issue with that particular property owner. So, we definitely want to work with the property owner, but if we see a very dangerous pattern, then we're going to address that. I believe that was in the mission. Next slide. So here's a situation where we have a fire escape and we have an awning and there's a commercial use below. And the awning, in this instance, obstructs the fire escape. So let's go to the next slide, and then Matt, I want you to go back to this. This shows that it's totally obstructed. That's underneath, looking up at the underside of the awning. So with that, Jamie, did you want to talk about this a little further?
Well, yeah, you can see there's a square toward the top, and that's where the trap door is supposed to operate. And lets the drop ladder come down. Either the commercial business or somebody put a fluorescent light fixture blocking the area where the drop ladder is supposed to come down. You can see the fluorescent light bulbs there. So that was a very dangerous situation, and we were able to get that corrected.
This is not something that if it's 2 o'clock in the morning and there's a big fire and there's smoke everywhere that the fire department wants to see with respect to that, or somebody climbing out onto that fire escape that wants to try and use it and it's totally obstructed below. So this just gives you an example of the types of things that we see when we're out there doing inspections or if the inspector is driving by or something like that. Is there anything else you want to do?
So we see a lot of this sort of situation all around town. And here's the diagram to put up.
Okay, can you hold this while you're talking?
Andy, which one is the power? Yeah. That one right there. Just hit it twice. Okay. Great. So here we have a 3-story building. And it has a commercial space on the ground floor. And let's say the housing inspection did a routine inspection in 2013, and that had all checked out. The owner was on top of everything and it passed. There weren't any problems. But now it's 2015, and the owner has rented out this commercial space to a fancy restaurant, we see that a lot now. This is a restaurant that specializes in French, Peruvian / Icelandic cuisine. And they are asking $35 for every entree. So it's a fancy place. And they put up an awning here. It's very expensive looking. They're trying to attract the right crowd that's going to spend $35 for a piece of salmon. And they go all out on this awning. It's bright, to brighten the image of the block. But it's blocking the fire escape drop ladder. But this person, the awning is his pride and joy. He does not want anything touched on that awning. He's not going to change it. And so in this kind of a situation, does anybody remember when the next time they would be due for a routine inspection would be? That's right. It would be 2018 until the next routine inspection. So we could have a situation where this thing is blocked for a long period of time. Now, the California Fire Code, I know, requires an annual inspection. And the fire marshal is a new fire marshal. He's inherited a process that's existed, but I was hoping to learn more about what the fire department process would be in this kind of a situation. So, Rosemary, could we?
And hopefully somebody someone would make a complaint and we would be able to address it, or we would maybe get a referral from fire or someone else. But so that would conclude what DBI and housing is dealing with as far as when we're going out there. I will tell you that when we go out on a complaint of an apartment building or a hotel, we're doing routine inspections. If we see these kind of things, we're going to call them to assist the property owner just to get as much coverage as possible. We would prefer to send the complete inspection package out to the property owner, but if we see something that's a life hazard, a fire hazard, we're going to include that in our notice of violation. If we see it as we're walking through the building to deal with either a complaint in the common area that someone has made, or to address something within a specific unit. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. But with that, then I want to stop and then let the fire marshal talk a bit about their process.
Sure. Fire department, we inspect annually all R2s and R1s, 9 units or more on the R2s. So it's roughly 6,000 a year. And our engine and truck companies do that. So the field companies go out there and do that. They inspect all the common space areas. They do not get into the individual units. They'll, again, common areas, garage, corridors, lobbies. They will look at the fire escapes. They will look at the fire escapes for any obstructions. We don't get involved with any functional testing of it. We don't drop the ladders. We don't get involved with the structural integrity of the fire escape itself. We do a visual inspection. Is there anything being stored or hung off the fire escape? We would walk underneath the drop ladder and look at an awning, and if it was apparent that it was blocked, that would be referred to the Bureau of Fire Prevention. The engine companies would. Also, we inspect high-rises annually, and we have a high-rise team that inspects them annually, and that's from a fire inspector. It's not the engine company or truck companies that do that, and there are quite a few residential high-rises as well. And let's see. So we look at everything Rosemary just pointed out, basically. We look at all fire protection systems, egress, fire alarms, whether they've been serviced in the last year. They're labeled standpipe sprinklers, service tags, pressure gauges, water on the system, exiting, basically all fire life safety systems within the common area. The engine companies, when they come across systems that are deficient or in some form of violation, they'll refer to our bureau, and our inspector, our district inspector, would respond to that. Our district inspector comes in the morning and they log onto their computer and they have their home page, and the first thing that pops up is complaints within their districts, priority complaints, referrals, and then construction inspections that are pending. And so it's right there. And so we triage the complaints, the big three, your fire alarm, sprinkler, egress. There are priority complaints, and then under that we'll have other complaints. It could be fire extinguishers that are out of service, the tags out of service, that's required to be inspected, etc. So we do track all of them. They are triaged. We do interact with our engine companies, and we do refer to other agencies when we come across whether it's DPH or housing, et cetera, when warranted.
Dan, was there anything else that I have the two Dans over here. So Dan Lowry, was there anything you wanted to add to this?
If the building department goes out there, the housing department will cite what's in their housing code. If the building department is involved in it, they'll cite what's a violation, like if the stairs are incomplete, handrails are missing, exit lights are missing. That's what the building department itself would cite if they get involved in it.
And I should say also that we do get referrals from Department of Public Health. If they're on site and they see a fire safety issue, they make a referral to us. And we do have in the housing code the requirement that the property owner has to demonstrate that the fire escape system is operational. So they have to either demonstrate that or have submit documentation that the fire escape has been properly serviced. So we do have that function testing requirement that was put in the housing code about, let's see, when did we put that in there? About 2005, I believe. It's been in there a number of years. So with that, if there's no other discussion, Jamie, is there anything else you wanted to add to this particular item? Okay. Tom, was there anything that you wanted to add at all? I wanted to give you that opportunity. Okay, so with that, this is agenda item number 4. I'd like to open this up for public comment. So, Charlie, and we have a microphone here. If you would, could we, Jamie, if you could pass the microphone around so that we can make sure that we get this down. Thank you.
Charlie Goss, San Francisco Apartment Association. Using I don't know if this is too loud, using the example on the board, let's just say that there was a complaint made to DBI and a housing inspector came in. They're there for a complaint about a unit-specific problem, but they're waiting out front to get buzzed in, and they see that the fire escape can't come all the way down. And presumably they write an NOV for that at that point. I'm wondering what the communication between fire and DBI looks like when they write that NOV. They go in, they go back to the office, they put in the NOV in their computer. I'm wondering if that shows up on the fire department's computer, if that would bump up that property to an earlier date for a regular inspection for the fire department, and sort of how the dialogue specifically with regards to NOVs between the departments works. And just sort of what that looks like, I guess.
Generally, as far as public comment, I wouldn't respond, but that's such a good question that if I could go ahead and clarify on that, Charlie. That's one of the reasons why we've got the task force. Right now, we don't have computer systems that talk to each other. We're doing that right now. DBI is actually doing that through Excel with planning, but it's not yet extended to other city agencies. So when the housing inspector in the example that you mentioned writes a notice of violation, they're writing one purely on the violations of the San Francisco Housing Code. So we don't necessarily have a great mechanism to let fire know that we've issued that notice if they want to consider that building in an engine inspection. And so that will be something that we will have further discussions with the fire department on. But it's an excellent point, and it's one of those things that we are talking with the fire department as we, per the ordinance that created the task force, within the next few weeks have to come up with written recommendations for the Board of Supervisors. As we get closer to that, and all that will be part of our public discussion, we will be looking at those types of things as far as recommendations are concerned. Did any of the other members want to comment on that at all?
And on the Department of Building Inspection on the DBI process, is that when we do cite a violation, there is a referral at the bottom. It'll CC fire department, it'll CC planning department, whatever department it goes, and eventually it gets there. It's not emailed. If something's a lake violation where it's a life safety issue, we can't call the fire department, or we can email the fire department. A lot of times they go right inside the building there and go right to fire plant check and let the fire marshal know, and they contact the fire department. But there is interagency communication. It's just not in a database where it's public information.
Thanks, Dan, for that clarification. And as we said, we're looking at opportunities to see how we can improve on that. So did you have something else that you wanted to add to that at all?
Basically, the fire department, everything that falls under the fire code, we address, and there's some redundancy with the housing code. So if it's being addressed through fire and it is redundant with housing, we wouldn't necessarily refer it to housing as being addressed through fire. That is something we can look at as far as sharing information. When I mentioned earlier about referring to other agencies, that's for scope that's outside the fire department. We would refer it to other agencies. If it's structural issues, if it was a health issue, obviously health department, et cetera. But anything that fell under the fire code, life safety, we would handle that ourselves.
And did you say earlier that when the engine companies are doing their inspection, it's for 9 units or more?
Correct. Correct.
So apartment buildings for us are 3 units or more. For between 3 and 9, there would be a gap there. So with respect to that, we would really need to get that. We would need to get that type of complaint or referral so that we could address some of the requirements that the housing code has with respect to fire safety issues. Because you're not necessarily looking at that, but that's the whole purpose of this task force is to try and identify those particular items. Okay, we're still on public comment. We don't want to get back into a discussion amongst the members, but we did want to address that. Is there any other public comment on this particular item, which is item number 4? Yes. Could we give that gentleman, oh, sure, let's start with you. Thank you.
So my name is Diana Flores. I work at Causa Justa Just Cause. Thank you for having this conversation. And I had some, I wanted to have some clarity around the understanding that the notice of violations, the corrective notice is done somehow not consistently. So it is my understanding that if a code violation exists, the fireman or fire person can then, if it's a minor violation, can choose not to write a corrective action or a notice of violation if it's something that can be abated the day of, or if it's something that can come to compliance soon. And so I'm wondering what happens when the fire department is going to buildings and there's issues that should be cited, should be noted, that then can create more of a consistency on these focus of enforcement areas, given that if there are notice of violations that are not consistently issued, then we won't know that a particular apartment, a particular house had, for example, obstruction to the means of egress. And that might be something that, when the Department of Building Inspection might go in, they might not notice it, but if it had been cited by the Department of Fire, then that can create a pattern that could be flagged so that in the future we have an understanding that at least from the fire department they were able to notice that there was some flags to point out. So just wanted to get an understanding of how where does discretion lie, and if there is a manual or a policy, as I've asked before, that says this is when you actually do a correction notice and this is where you actually do a notice of violation. So I just wanted clarification on that.
Should I answer that?
Generally, we don't comment as far as public comment, but if you would like to clarify the
Sure.
issue, I want to give you the opportunity.
Sure.
Yeah.
We have a fire department manual, an R2 manual that's available to all our engine and truck companies, and it's a guide to the inspection process of all the R2s. And in there, it gives different levels of violations and how to respond to them. And so if something is not, let's say, life-threatening, but it's a maintenance issue, again, I go back to the fire extinguisher, you can give a notice of correction. It wouldn't necessarily be a notice of violation. A notice of correction is handled at the engine company level, and they would go back out within a week or two, whatever the notice was given, and would handle that themselves. It wouldn't come to the Bureau of Fire Prevention. If it rises to the level of a notice of violation, then it is referred to our department, our division of fire prevention, and there's a penalty fee, a penalty associated with that when we go out and we take a look at that. If we go out and it's still a violation, we can offer a second violation, and again, it all depends on the level of the violation. If it's an egress issue, we're there within 24 hours. If it's a fire alarm or sprinkler, we're there within 24 hours, 48 at the most. That's our window. Something that rises to that level, if it's not immediately abated, we can give a citation, which is the next level up. And then after that, we have ACE, Accelerated Code Enforcement, which is a task force with the city attorney, the health, building, fire, police are all involved with that.
So is there any other public comment on this item? Could we pass the microphone on to that gentleman?
Yes, I actually have it, but I'm hoping I don't need it. I don't know. If you can't hear me, let me know. So my name is Clifford. I work with the
We do need you to do that because we're recording this. So if you don't do that, it's not going to pick it up.
Okay,
Thank
can you hear me now?
Yes, we
Great.
can.
All right, great. So my name is Clifford. I work with the Center City Escrow Collaborative, and I just wanted to offer a comment but also a reflection. I think back in June, I think it was, through DBI, Department of Building Inspection, the collaboratives, and the San Francisco Fire Department, we actually began to start working on the campaign with the Red Cross in two parts for fire safety and fire education. The goal was to work with property owners and building owners around those two issues. At the time when we began to move in that campaign, we wanted to talk about goals, we wanted to talk about challenges, and sort of opportunities. And I know that for us as an outreach program, one of the challenges we always face is actually access. One of the challenges I know that some of the fire personnel were talking about was actually along the same subject of actually enforcement. So just as we were reviewing your presentation about the housing code and its process, and I heard what you have to say about the process for the fire department, made me wonder, after looking at the presentation, that in fact, in the housing code process, there's a director's hearing. And I haven't ever come across or heard of that exists in the fire housing code. And so I'm wondering, if that doesn't exist, is there a possibility of maybe considering, sort of a pilot project or something around that, with respect to the goal of obviously saving property, but more importantly than that, in saving lives?
Thank you. Next speaker, thank you.
Hi, my name is Leticia, also here with Causa Justa, and I just had also just a comment to offer. I think it would be great for the fire department to have some kind of online searchable database, right? Or something to just see, when a last inspection was conducted on a property, or if there's any violations in the past. I know if there is a fire, we can go ahead and email their fire arson investigative unit, but it would just be really helpful to have something online.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Diana Flores from Causa Justa. We did want to offer the suggestion and just a flag of language capacity on both the website, and I know that the Bureau of Fire Prevention does offer anonymous complaints. You actually have to call in. So we wanted to suggest that if we can have a better understanding of what the language capacity is for the fire department, so that we can then use that tool that exists in case clients or tenants want to do anonymous complaint. And I also saw that the sf311.org website had a really neat photo type complaint and anonymous form already on site that I think can be helpful to implement on the actual fire on the Bureau of Fire Prevention website, because it's already been created for the city. And I think the other thing that we want to flag and want to raise concern of is if it's accessible to get these records otherwise than in person, or and I think we mentioned it in the last meeting, and folks are sharing this, the kind of shareable database, but also the complaint tracking that exists in DBI, and modeling something like that, because what I heard is that there is a timeline and there is a reinspection and there is a fee associated with the ways in which the fire department does their complaint, and that sounds awesome. And there's still some tracking that we would like to do to support tenants to see how far along their case is, or what is the level of evaluation that's at, so that we can inform when a fire report might be available, or what are the other tools that we can use in the interim while a fire report is being produced. Because there's also assistance that can be offered to all the agencies here present, but there has to be more transparency of where you are at in your complaint process.
Thank you. Next speaker. Did you have? Okay. Is there any more public comment regarding agenda item number 4? There being none, we are continuing to look at this particular issue. We will definitely take the public comment and have further discussions on this that will also shed some light on some additional recommendations that we will make at the end of this particular process. Now we'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is the multi-unit residential and multi-unit buildings at greatest risk of fire safety hazards. We are still trying to compile a database, and we're still discussing what the criteria should be. So with those introductory comments, I'd like to open this up for discussion of the members. This also was an item that is continued from, I believe, the last agenda meeting, which I was not able to attend. So with that, Dan, was there anything Dan Lowry, would you like to start maybe the comments on that?
Dan, would you maybe comment what you're working on now? Dan's
Okay, great. Thank you, gentlemen.
actually working on a database. I'll make one comment. We are trying to get information out of our MIS. We work with housing and we work with building. We still do not have that information. It takes a while to compile, and we are working on that. And we're also going to work with the fire department. The fire department's working on that now, and he could give you a brief comment on that, Dan.
Yes, it'll be very brief. I just got this today. I have a list of all the fires the last 2 years, residential fires in San Francisco. So in there, it gives the occupancy, obviously residential, the number of units, whether single, two-family, or multiple families. It'll tell us what type of fire protection systems were there, did they function properly, et cetera, and even the value and the damage from the fire. So that is preliminary stage as far as our review with this whole task force, and we can provide greater feedback in the coming weeks here on that.
Thank you so much. And as I said, when we put this data together, we're going to look to see what information that we have at DBI that we can put together with us so that we get more information as far as patterns of problems with high-risk buildings. We pretty much know that from the DBI standpoint, we're looking at usually the most high-risk buildings are going to be the larger wood frame, non-rated buildings. That's typically the issue that we have. And that one of the things that was part of the discussion were fire stops, right? Do you want to talk about that just a little bit? Because that is, trying to identify those buildings is an issue.
Okay. A lot of the older buildings, say from 1915 maybe to 1950, maybe early 1960s, a lot of those older style buildings, like mostly in the 20s to the 40s or 50s, were balloon framed. And what that means is that there's voids in the framing itself, and there's voids going from the framing of the walls into the roof. And one of the options that we talked about, if they could fire safe and fire stop that area between the walls and the roof. And in discussions with the fire department, sometimes that could stop a one-alarm fire going into a four-alarm fire. Once the fire hits the attic and hits the roof area, it really escalates quick. And that was just one option that we would present. And it's not a very costly item if they have access to it, just to put some rock wool, fire wool, that could help prevent the fire from spreading.
Thank you. Do the members have any other comments they'd like to make on this particular agenda item? There being none, then I'd like to open agenda item number 5 up to public comment. Is there any public comment on this particular item? Could we give the gentleman the microphone?
Yes. Okay. I just want to sound okay.
We'll pause for technical difficulties.
Okay. Just one brief comment on the multi-use buildings, and that is we have a program in our department called it's our code enforcement outreach program, which primarily deals with departments. And so some of those departments have fewer number of units, and also there's some language challenges to people who live in those particular dwellings. And it seems to be that there's a little bit of a potential gap in trying to make sure that we're working with that demographic group here in San Francisco. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on this particular item, agenda item number 5? And as I indicated, this item will move forward to future meetings. Then there being none, let's move then to agenda item number 6, which is the topics for future meetings. And that pretty much is dictated by Ordinance 90-15, which created the task force. So some of these items will move forward, and we definitely hear the public comment with respect to desiring more transparency and record keeping and tracking so that occupants of buildings and property owners can see what's going on and participate in ensuring that they are safe in the residential buildings, particularly those that are multi-unit or multi-use. So our next agenda items will reflect that. And so do the members have anything else they wish to discuss with respect to agenda item number 6 before we open it up for public comment? There being none, do we have any public comment regarding the future meeting topics of the task force? Our next meeting is scheduled for October 6th at 10 a.m. That will be next door at 1650 Mission in the Golden Gate Conference Room on the 5th floor. So I just want to make sure that people who may be wanting to attend the next meeting understand that it will be at a different time and it will be next door. So is there any public comment regarding the future topics of the Fire Task Force? Could we have you use the microphone? Thank you so much.
Awesome. So I think this might have been reasonable to say in the last public comment, but it definitely makes sense to add it in the future conversations. I was seeing the chart that is created for DBI and the organizational chart and the focus areas. And I know there's a lot more staff in your fire department, and there's a lot of work that is done and held by your department. And I think we would benefit from understanding of what your 40 fire inspectors, what are their concentrations of divisions, or what are they seeing in their neighborhoods, or if they are dealing with, if there are divisions of your department that are purely structural, and then who are those people to call and contact in terms of like how is it that we're following up with particular complaints, given that the other thing we wanted to flag and wanted to suggest is the exploration of what are the topics or what are the flags that the fire department is forwarding to the Department of Building Inspection, given that you are on site annually and the Department of Building Inspection, there's some lapse in their inspections by the way that is designed. And so that is something that we would want to know if there can be recommendations around, and I think this was a conversation we started last meeting, but what are the recommendations of shareable information, in particular for the annual inspections that the fire department does?
Thank you. Is there any other public comment on agenda item number 6? Mr. Reed.
Mr. Reed. Hi, I'm Jim Reed. I'm a member of the Code Advisory Committee.
Again, my name is Jim Reed. I'm a member of the Code Advisory Committee. And also being part of the industry, I'm an electrical contractor that deals with alarm systems and things like that. What I find that the committee might want to pursue is to disseminate testing frequencies or what needs to be tested in a building, such as the fire alarm, such as the sprinkler system, such as how often the fire extinguishers have to be tested, certified. There is always confusion. There's even confusion in my industry as to how often fire alarms have to be tested. Even though the NFPA spells it out, there's still some interpretation differences. But I have a lot of customers that phone that absolutely don't know. They think we do fire alarm or fire extinguishers. Might point out who does this sort of thing. I mean, just something simple that could clarify and make it easier on homeowners. You can disseminate it with property managers and the Apartment House Association. I think it might be helpful. That's all.
Jim, as we still have our communications director here, would it be helpful if we considered some of these things as we build up our our web page on that and to add some of these things?
Yes, I
So we'll
think so.
definitely look at that.
I
Thank
think it
you.
would
That's
be
an excellent
helpful.
point. Thank
Right.
you for that,
Okay.
Jim. Is there any other public comment with respect to item number 6? There being none, then, let's move to agenda item number 7, which is general public comment to the task force with respect to perhaps something that was not on today's agenda. Any general public comment? There being none, then we will adjourn. And again, our next meeting will be October 6th at Next Door at 10 a.m. on the 5th floor. Thank you all for taking the time. We really do appreciate it. You coming at a late hour to join us. Thank you. We are adjourned.
We had Rich over for